I was driving cross-country from Phoenix to Dallas about 3 years back. It was one of those spontaneous trips where I figured I'd just stop when exhaustion hit. Around 11 at night, my eyes started getting heavy, and I knew I couldn't push it anymore. I saw a sign for lodging at the next exit and decided to call it a night. The exit led me to this tiny desert town that looked like time forgot about it. There were maybe 5 buildings total, and one of them was this rundown motel with a flickering neon sign. The parking lot was mostly empty except for an old pickup truck and a sedan that looked like it hadn't moved in weeks. I parked near the office and went inside to check in. The guy at the desk was older, probably in his 60s, and he barely looked up from his magazine when I walked in. I paid cash for the room, and he handed me a physical key, not a key card. That should have been my first red flag. He told me I was in room 12 and pointed down the row of doors. I thanked him and headed to my room. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a place like this. The carpet was stained, the bedspread looked like it was from the 70s, and there was a musty smell that hit me as soon as I opened the door, but I was too tired to care. I threw my bag on the chair, used the bathroom, and collapsed onto the bed. I must have fallen asleep within minutes, because the next thing I remember is waking up in total darkness. Something had pulled me out of sleep, but I couldn't figure out what. Then I heard it. The doorknob was turning. I stayed completely still and watched the knob slowly rotate back and forth. Someone was definitely trying to get in. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought whoever was out there might hear it. The turning stopped for a moment, and then I heard scratching at the door. It sounded like someone was using a tool to try to pick the lock. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but realized I had left it in the car. I was stuck in this room with no way to call for help. The scratching continued for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes. Then everything went silent. I waited in the darkness, barely breathing, listening for any sound. After about 10 minutes of nothing, I finally got the courage to get out of bed. I crept over the window and pulled back the corner of the curtain just enough to peek out. I could see the parking lot dimly lit by that flickering sign. There was nobody outside my door that I could see, but then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There was now a third vehicle in the parking lot that wasn't there before. It was parked right in front of my room. I let the curtain fall back and moved away from the window. I spent the rest of that night sitting in the chair by the door, wide awake, listening to every sound. When the sun finally came up around 6, I grabbed my stuff and got out of there as fast as I could. As I was leaving, I noticed deep scratch marks around the lock on my door that definitely weren't there the night before. I also saw the old guy from the front desk watching me from the office window with this strange expression on his face. I got in my car and didn't stop driving until I was 2 towns over. I travel a lot for my job in sales. I've stayed in hundreds of hotels over the years, and most of them blur together. But there's one stay that I'll never forget. I was in Detroit for a conference and staying at this mid-range hotel downtown. Nothing fancy, but nothing terrible either. It was one of those corporate chain hotels with identical rooms on every floor. I was on the 8th floor in a room that faced the street. The first night was completely normal. I attended the conference during the day, came back, ordered room service, and went to bed early. The second night is when things got weird. I had stayed out later networking with some colleagues and didn't get back to my room until almost midnight. I was getting ready for bed when the room phone started ringing. I looked at the clock and saw it was just past midnight. I figured it was the front desk calling about something, maybe a noise complaint or a billing issue. I picked up the phone and said hello. The voice on the other end was a woman, and she sounded frantic. She said I needed to leave my room immediately and go to the lobby. I asked her what was wrong, and she said there was an emergency in the building. She wouldn't give me any details, just kept insisting I needed to get out of my room right away. I asked if there was a fire or something, and she said no, just please come down to the lobby now. Then she hung up before I could ask anything else. I stood there confused, but figured if there was some kind of emergency, I should probably listen. I put my shoes back on and grabbed my wallet and phone. When I opened my door, the hallway was completely normal. No alarms, no smoke, no other guests evacuating. I walked to the elevator and took it down to the lobby. When the doors opened, the lobby was quiet and empty. There was nobody at the front desk. I walked over and rang the bell, but nobody came out. I called out hello a few times, but got no response. I was standing there feeling increasingly annoyed when the elevator dinged behind me. I turned around expecting to see someone, but the elevator was empty. Then it dinged again. And again. All 3 elevators started going up and down, dinging each time they stopped on the lobby floor, but they were all empty. I had had enough at that point. I took the stairs back up to the 8th floor, which took forever, and went back to my room. I locked the door and put the security latch on. I tried to go to bed, but I was too wired from the weirdness. About 30 minutes later, the phone rang again. I debated not answering it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was the same woman's voice. She asked why I didn't stay in the lobby. I told her I did go down there, but nobody was around. She insisted I had not come to the lobby. I argued with her and said I absolutely did. She started getting angry and her voice changed. It got deeper, and she said I needed to come down again right now or there will be consequences. That's when I hung up on her. I unplugged the phone from the wall and tried to go to sleep. I had just started drifting off when I heard a key card being used on my door. I sat up and watched as a handle turned, and the door pushed open a few inches before catching on the security latch. A hand reached through the gap and tried to unhook the latch. I jumped out of bed and ran to the door, slamming it shut on the hand. I heard someone yelp, and the hand pulled back. I yelled through the door that I was calling the police. I heard footsteps running away down the hall. I immediately called the front desk from my cell phone. A man answered, and I told him what just happened. He said he was the only one working, and he hadn't left the desk. He also said there were no female employees working overnight. He came up to my floor with security, and we checked the whole hallway but found nobody. I packed my stuff and checked out that night. I never did find out who that woman on the phone was or who tried to get into my room. My boyfriend Tyler and I went to California last summer for a week. We wanted something relaxing near the ocean and found this hotel in a smaller beach town that wasn't too touristy. It was about a 10-minute walk from the water, and the price was decent. We checked in on a Sunday afternoon and spent the first few days just enjoying the beach and exploring the town. Everything was great until Wednesday night. We had gone to dinner and a movie and got back to the hotel around 10:30. Tyler went to take a shower while I went to grab some ice for our drinks. The ice machine was on our floor at the end of the hallway near the stairwell. I took the ice bucket and walked down there. When I got to the little alcove where the machine was, I noticed a woman standing nearby looking at her phone. She glanced up at me and smiled, and I smiled back. I started filling the bucket, and she just stood there. I figured she was waiting for me to finish, so I hurried up, but when I was done and started to leave, she didn't move toward the machine. She just followed me back down the hallway. I thought maybe her room was near ours, but when I stopped at our door, she stopped too, about 15 feet away. I went inside quickly and told Tyler about the weird woman. He said maybe she was just drunk or confused about which room was hers. We didn't think much more about it that night. The next morning we went out for breakfast and spent the day at the beach like usual. Later that afternoon, we were walking to the downtown area looking at shops. We were in this little bookstore when I noticed the same woman from the night before. She was standing outside on the sidewalk, looking through the window, directly at me. I told Tyler, and we both looked at her. She didn't look away or act embarrassed about being caught staring. She just kept watching us. We left the bookstore and walked in the opposite direction. I kept looking back and saw her following us from about half a block away. Tyler said we should try to lose her, so we took a bunch of random turns and went into a busy restaurant. We sat there for over an hour and I didn't see her again. We thought we had successfully ditched her. We did some more walking around and shopping and eventually headed back toward the hotel as it was getting dark. We were only a block away when I saw her again. She was sitting on a bench near the hotel entrance. When she saw us, she stood up and started walking toward us. Tyler told me to go inside while he dealt with her. I went into the lobby and watched through the glass doors. Tyler approached her and they talked for a minute. I could see him gesturing and looking upset. The woman just stood there not saying much. After a few minutes, Tyler came back inside and the woman walked away. He told me that when he confronted her, she claimed she wasn't following us and that it was just a coincidence she was there. He told her to leave us alone, and she just shrugged and walked off. We went up to our room and tried to forget about it. Around midnight, we were both in bed watching TV when I heard our door handle jiggle. I looked over and saw the handle moving up and down like someone was trying to open it. Tyler jumped up and looked through the peephole, but couldn't see anyone. He opened the door and looked out into the hallway. The woman was standing about 10 feet away, just staring at him. Tyler yelled at her, asking what her problem was. She didn't say anything. He told her he was calling the cops if she didn't leave. She still didn't speak, but she turned and walked away toward the stairs. We called the front desk and reported what was happening. They said they would send security to check it out. About 15 minutes later, someone knocked on our door, and it was a security guard. He said they had reviewed the camera footage and found the woman. She wasn't a guest of the hotel, but she had somehow gotten inside. They escorted her out and told her she wasn't allowed back. He apologized and said they would watch the cameras to make sure she didn't return. We were both pretty shaken up, but tried to get some sleep. Thankfully, we didn't see her again for the rest of the trip, but I was definitely on edge the whole time. When I was in college, I worked at a hotel near campus to make some extra money. I usually worked the overnight shift from 11 at night until 7 in the morning on weekends. The pay was decent and most nights were dead quiet, so I could study while working. The hotel was one of those extended stay places that had studios with kitchenettes. It was popular with families and business travelers. I mostly just sat at the front desk, checked an occasional late arrival, and handled any guest requests that came up. One Saturday night, I was working alone as usual. It was around 2 in the morning, and I hadn't seen a single person in hours. I was reading a textbook, trying to stay awake, when I heard the elevator ding. I looked up and saw a man step out and start walking toward the desk. He was probably in his 40s, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and he had this intense look on his face. He came up to the desk and said his TV wasn't working. I asked him what room he was in, and he told me room 423. I pulled up his information on the computer and verified he was a guest. I asked him some basic troubleshooting questions about the TV. Was it plugged in? Did he try different channels? Did he check the input settings? He seemed confused by all my questions and kept saying he just couldn't figure out. I told him I could call our maintenance person, but they wouldn't be in until morning. He said that wasn't acceptable and he needed someone to come fix it now. I explained that I couldn't leave the front desk unattended, but I could try to walk him through some things over the phone. He insisted that wouldn't work, and I needed to come show him. There was something off about the whole situation, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go up to his room. I figured it would be quick and I could get back to the desk. I followed him to the elevator and we rode up to the 4th floor in silence. He didn't try to make small talk or anything. We walked down the hallway to room 423 and he unlocked the door. When we stepped inside, I immediately noticed the TV was on and working fine. It was showing some news channel. I mentioned this to him, and he said it had just started working. I said, okay then, and turned to leave. But he moved in front of the door, blocking my exit. He said he had another problem now and needed me to look at the air conditioning. I told him it seemed fine, and I really needed to get back to the front desk. He didn't move out of the way. He just stared at me with this blank expression. I could feel my heart starting to race. I pulled out my phone and very deliberately opened it while maintaining eye contact with him. I told him I was going to call my manager if he didn't let me leave right now. For a few seconds, he just stood there, and I genuinely thought I was going to have to fight my way out. Then he suddenly stepped aside and opened the door wider. I didn't hesitate. I walked past him quickly and headed straight for stairs. I practically ran down all 4 flights and burst back into the lobby. I went behind the desk and called my manager immediately. I explained what happened and she told me to call the police. I did, and they arrived about 20 minutes later. I gave them all the information, including his room number and description. They went up to check on the room, but when they got there, it was empty. The guests had checked in earlier that evening and paid cash. The ID he used was apparently fake, because when the police ran it, nothing came up. The guy had completely vanished. The police took my statement and told me to call them immediately if I saw him again. I finished my shift, but I was paranoid the rest of the night. I quit that job 2 weeks later. I never found out what that man's intentions were, but I'm grateful I trusted my instincts and got out of there when I did. I don't even want to think about what might have happened if I hadn't. A few years ago, my buddy Marcus and I took a road trip from Chicago to Denver. We were planning to split the driving and do it in 2 days with one overnight stop somewhere in the middle. The first day went smoothly. We left early, drove for about 10 hours, and started looking for a place to stop for the night. Marcus was in charge of finding us a hotel. I told him to find something clean and safe, and I didn't care if it cost a bit more. He said he found a place and pulled up the directions. He assured me it had good reviews and looked perfectly fine. We followed the GPS for about 30 minutes off the highway until we ended up in this tiny rural town. I mean tiny. There was basically one main street with a few shops, and that was it. The GPS led us to the edge of town where there was this old motel that looked like it was built in the 50s and hadn't been updated since. I immediately told Marcus this place looked terrible and we should find somewhere else. He said we were already here and it was getting late, and everywhere else was at least an hour away. He had already booked the room and paid for it online, so we might as well stay. I was frustrated but too tired to argue. We parked and went to the office to get our key. The woman at the desk was friendly enough and gave us the key to room 7. We walked over to our room, which was on the ground floor facing the parking lot. The room smelled like cigarettes and mildew. There were 2 beds with threadbare blankets and a TV that looked ancient. Marcus immediately claimed one bed, and within minutes he was snoring. I was annoyed but also exhausted, so I figured I'd just deal with it for one night. I lay down on my bed and tried to fall asleep. About an hour later, I was still wide awake. I was thirsty and realized I had finished my water bottle in the car. I got up and decided to see if there was a vending machine somewhere. I went outside and walked around the building. Sure enough, there was a vending machine near the office. I walked over and put some money in to buy a bottle of water. The machine made some noises, but nothing came out. I tried again and same thing. I had just wasted $4 on nothing. I was about to walk back when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and there was a man standing there. He had appeared out of nowhere. He was tall and thin with dirty clothes and an unkempt beard. He didn't say anything, just stared at me. I said hello, but he didn't respond. I started walking back toward my room, and I could hear him following me. I walked faster, and his footsteps got faster too. By the time I got to my room door, I could hear him running behind me. I fumbled with the key for a second, but got the door open and slammed it shut behind me. I locked it and immediately heard pounding on the door. The man was banging on the door and yelling incomprehensibly. I tried to wake Marcus up, but he was completely knocked out. The pounding continued for several minutes, and I was seriously considering calling the police. Then suddenly it stopped. Everything went quiet. I looked through the peephole, but couldn't see anyone. I stayed by the door, listening for another 10 minutes, but heard nothing. Eventually, I went back to bed, but barely slept the rest of the night. Every little sound had me on edge. When morning came, Marcus woke up refreshed and said he had slept great. I told him what happened, and he didn't believe me at first. He thought I was exaggerating or making up to prove a point about the motel being sketchy. I showed him the marks on the door from where the guy had been pounding on it. There were muddy handprints and scratches. That shut him up pretty quick. We packed up and got out of there as fast as we could. Marcus apologized and admitted he should have found a better place. I told him if we ever take another road trip together, I'm in charge of booking the hotels. Some people might call me paranoid after that experience, but I call it being smart and staying safe.